That means the unemployment queues will be longer. That means the recovery will be that much harder, and that there will be even more damage done to the budget over the longer term. We have said that if the government is going to commit money of this magnitude, then let's make sure that that money is effectively spent, that we get maximum bang for buck, that we satisfy that objective that we began with, to keep more Australian workers attached to their employer so that the recovery can be easier than otherwise. The way the government has severely bungled this JobKeeper program means that unemployment will be worse. It means the recovery will be harder. It means the budget will be in worse nick over the longer term. Now, of course, in the usual way, after this, this 7-year government, Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg have spent a lot of time in recent days talking about the Labor Party. And we saw that again today in that pathetic opinion piece written by the Treasurer in The Australian. And we won't be taking lectures about fiscal responsibility from a mob who had already more than doubled public debt before this crisis, who had delivered only deficits after promising only surpluses, and who have their names now on the worst budget stuff-up in the history of the Commonwealth. The days of this government being taken seriously on the budget or the economy are long gone. The Prime Minister's at the Press Club tomorrow. We need to see a genuine, comprehensive plan to respond to this crisis more effectively, to bolster the recovery, not snap back all the support in the economy, and to set Australia up for the long term. We don't want from the Prime Minister all of the usual narrow ideological obsessions, all of the usual politicking and point scoring and finger pointing. We deserve better than that from this Prime Minister. He has an opportunity at the Press Club to clean up this mess that he and the Treasurer have made of the JobKeeper program, to outline what they're going to do to fix it, and to outline how he will create jobs into this recovery and to set Australia up for the long term. Now, the fear that many have in this community is this: having implemented JobKeeper too slowly and too narrowly, the government risks now withdrawing that support too quickly and too bluntly. We need the government to be smart here. This crisis has a long way to run yet. The Reserve Bank and others have said that unemployment will be higher for longer. The Treasury has said they still expect unemployment to hit double digits. We need from the government a better effort than what's been revealed by these humiliating admissions over JobKeeper. We need a genuine plan from the Prime Minister at the Press Club. We haven't got that so far.
There could be an element of serendipity in this. Are you saying that JobKeeper really is the only way going forward to spend this money to stimulate things to keep people employed?
Well, JobKeeper is obviously the central component of the government's response to this economic crisis. And what we need to see is we need to see those dollars spent effectively. That means no more of this bungling incompetence which has led to this humiliating admission. Clearly it's not the only thing that the government needs to be doing. Anthony Albanese and Jason Clare, for example, have talked about the need to get investment in residential construction right, because there is a fear that that will fall off a cliff in the coming weeks and months. Clearly there are issues in communities which rely heavily on tourism which need to be addressed. The point that we've made about JobKeeper is this: it can be better targeted, it could perhaps be tapered, but don't just snap it out of the economy in a way that would jeopardise the recovery before it even gathers pace. There are a range of things the government can be doing to make sure that the unemployment queues are not longer than necessary. So far, their bungling incompetence has meant that more Australians have headed off to Centrelink. That means a longer and more difficult recovery, and it means even more implications for the budget in the long term too.
On super, a third of people who've accessed their super early because of the pandemic are under the age of 30. What do you make of that?
Well, a lot of people who've been excluded unnecessarily from the JobKeeper payments have been forced to withdraw their super, and that will have devastating consequences for the type of income that they can rely on in retirement. Clearly, this crisis is disproportionately impacting younger workers who are forced to take more of their super out, and in doing so, the government is in many ways robbing them of a decent retirement. I'm conscious that my colleague Stephen Jones will have more to say about this later today, so I'll leave it at that.
Jim, on borders, and in light of disastrous situations here for domestic tourism operators, do you believe Queensland should open its border, considering all the Deputy Chief Medical Officers have stated that there's no medical reason to keep state borders closed?
Well, first of all, I mean, Queensland and the Queensland government has done a really good job limiting the spread of this virus, and that needs to be acknowledged. And they've done a good job because they have relied heavily on the advice of the medical officers here in Queensland, and they've made difficult but careful and cautious decisions about limiting the spread of the virus, because if the virus was to break out here, that would have devastating economic consequences. Clearly, everybody wants the border reopened when it's safe for that to happen, when it's responsible and appropriate for that to happen. We all know that every 10th job or so here in Queensland relies on tourism in one way or another. We know towns like Cairns, that reliance on tourism is even more pronounced. And so we want to see the borders open when it's safe, when it's appropriate, and when the medical advice is consistent with that. I know that a lot of the mayors around Queensland have said publicly, and not just Labor mayors, have said that we need to have an abundance of caution here, because an outbreak of the virus will be devastating for the state economy. I'm also conscious that Anastasia Palaszczuk will be meeting with the Mayor of the Gold Coast to talk about this. We do need to be cognisant of the fact that our Queensland-New South Wales border has a couple of very big population centres either side of it. That means that the decisions taken in this space by those two states are more consequential than otherwise, and we need to factor that in as well.
The Premier said, what she said was that these borders could stay up until September. The flip side of that message is that the roadmap says all going well, it'll open in July. Is that something she should equally emphasise and not scare the forces?
Well, one of the things that's been missed in all of this is that the Premier has said that the border closures are under constant review. That means that if the medical advice changes or the circumstances change, or there is an extra level of confidence that we can contain the virus even with the borders open, then obviously she will consider all of that. All around Australia, premiers are taking the best decisions they can about very complex and consequential matters based on the advice that they all receive. That's what Premier Palaszczuk is doing. She's being supported in that by a number of the mayors around Queensland. And I think that all she's done there is she's been carefully managing the expectations of the public, at the same time as pointing out that it's under constant review, so that if the borders could be opened earlier, I'm sure that she would take that on board.